And we're on the very top of Tesvav and Aleph. Bishlam, so we counted 48 male Nevi'im, and some of them included the fathers of Nevi'im who were mentioned, like in Sefer Yirmiyahu, there's Baruch ben Neriah ben Machseah, and there's Sariah ben Neriah ben Machseah, and we're assuming that we're also including Neriah, we're also including Machseah, even though we don't have Nevuos that were specifically recorded in their names. So Bishlam, with respect to the sons, in a mefarshi ela basayo minalan, how do we know that the fathers were also Nevi'im? Kedulu, like Ula says, Ula, komakam shishma v'shemavi b'nevius, whenever a Navi is described as such, and his father is also mentioned, B'yaduashu Navi ben Navi, that means that not only is the person giving the Nebuah a Navi, but his father was also a Navi, worthy of note. Shema v'lo shemavi, if his name is mentioned, but not his father's name, B'yaduashu Navi lo ben Navi, then you know that he was a Navi, but his father wasn't a Navi. Shema v'shem Yiro, if his name is mentioned in the city's name, the first B'yadua, Shehu me also ir. So then that is an indication that he is a Navi from that city. Shunavi me also ir, the Bach is one Navi me also. Shema v'lo shem Yiro, if his name is mentioned, but not his city's name, B'yadua Shem Yerushalayim, it means that he's originally from Yerushalayim. Stam Navi must come from the holiest of places. So unless it says otherwise, we assume he's from Yerushalayim. Masni Satana, we have a tradition from a Braisa called Mishmasa Maisa Bosav Stumin, who follow Kosu Be'akamem L'Shebach. If you have a person listed together with his ancestors, and we don't know anything about his ancestors, but we know that the son who is described at the end of the Yichus line was really praiseworthy. So Kigon Dvar Hashem Asher Hayah Tzefanya ben Kushi ben Gedalia, like it says about Tzefanya, the son of Kushi, the son of Gedalia. Zephaniah prophesied during the period of Yoshio. He prophesied in the Bati Midrasha, so he had his own special place. Yadua Shehu Tzadik ben Tzadik. That means that not only was we know Zephaniah was a Tzadik, it means that Kushi and Gedalia were also Tzadikim. And whenever we have a long list of a person's yichus, but the one is being described in a derogatory way. We know Yishmael was the assassin of Gedaliah ben Achikam, so he was not a good guy. Rasha ben Rasha means that not only was Yishmael a Rasha, but the other ones who were mentioned, namely Netanya and Elishama, must have been Rishayim as well. Amar Nachman Malachi is a Mordechai. Malachi was Mordechai. It was new. So he's saying that these were not two separate Nevi'im; they were the same Navi. You know, Zechariah Malachi says Malachi was Mordechai. Malachi, why was he called Malachi? Mishnah Lamelech, because he was the second to the Melech. He's like Melech. Meisvei Baruch ben Neriah Usariah ben Machseah Daniel Mordechai Balshan V'Chagai Zechariah Malachi. All of these individuals, Kulan Isnabu B'Shnash Shtayim LeDayavish, that they all prophesied during the second year when the Beis HaMikdash was finally rebuilt. The Dayavish Acharon, the Dayavish who came after Achashverosh, they all prophesied during that time. So here we have Mordechai separately listed and Malachi separately listed. So you have to, that's a good kasha. Tanya Brisa says, Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha Malachi is Ezra. The Malachi was really the same as Ezra. The Malachi Shemo. The Chachamim say no. The Chachamim say that his real name was Malachi. So Amar Rav Nachman Mistabek Man Dama Malachi is Ezra. The Ksiva Benevius Malachi. It makes sense that we would say the Malachi that was the same as Ezra, because it says in the Nevuah, Malachi is something similar to that which Ezra was involved with, namely the banishing of the foreign wives, because the Nevuah Malachi says Yehuda, that Yehuda has rebelled. Israel done an abomination in the Jewish people, Yerushalayim. That they have Yehuda has desecrated Kodesh Hashem, Asher Ahebu Val Bas El Nechar, and they've married foreign wives. Uman Afish Nachum Nachuyas, and who was it who was responsible for banishing the foreign wives? You know, we know that was indeed Ezra. The Ksiv Bayan, as it says, that when Ezra was finding out what's going on with the Jews in Israel, when he came there, Bayan Shechenya ben Yechiel mi bnei Elam, Vayomer Ezra, and he said to Ezra, Anachnu ma'alnu be'elokenu. We have rebelled against Hashem. We have acted in a renegade fashion. V'noshem noshim nachrios. V'noshem nachrios mi'amei haaretz. And we've taken the non-Jewish wives from the people of the land, and now the pasuk goes on to say that it requires purification. Yesh mikvah Yisrael alzos. Tanam abanan abba nashim yafiyos hayu b'olam. There were four very beautiful women, outstandingly beautiful women in the history of the world. Who are they? Sarah, Rachel, Abigail, Esther. These were the four. The Maharsha says that means that we know there were other beautiful women that are recorded in the Torah, such as Rachel and Rivka and Tamar and Bathsheba and so forth. It means that they were noticeably more beautiful than all the other women of their generation. According to the opinion that Esther wasn't really naturally so beautiful, she was green, she just had a lot of charm. Mapik Esther ma'ayel Vashti. So take out Esther and bring in Vashti. So Vashti got killed, but at least she gets an honorable mention for her beauty. Tana Rabban and Rachav Bishma Zinsa. Rachav, people would have immoral thoughts when they just think of the name Rachav. Yael Bakola. Yael, if they would hear the voice of Yael, like on the radio, even if they didn't see Yael, so it would remind them of their beauty, and then they would lust for her. Abigail B'schirasa, Abigail, you just mentioned a news item about Abigail, and it would cause people to lust. Michal Basha B'riyasa, and Michal, where people would look at her, and that would cause immoral thoughts. So Rabbi Yitzchak goes further. He says anybody who would mention Rachav, the name is recalled. So then they would have an emission because they would become so excited. So Amalei Rav Nachman, Anamina Rachav. I said Rachav's name twice, and it has no effect on me. So Amalei. So Rabbi Yitzchak explained, no, Kikamina Biyoda v'Makila. I'm talking about people who knew her, people who know what she looks like and recognize her. Some say Biyoda means carnally, that carnally, somebody who had gone to her as a prostitute, so that then it would have that effect. This Gemara is quoted in the context of Koalisha, that maybe it's not as bad if you hear a woman's voice and you don't know what she looks like. Mordechai Yada is I think talks about that. Mordechai Yada is called Asher Naasa. So it says Mordechai knew everything that had transpired. My Amar. So the pasuk goes on to say, that he called out with a great wailing voice. What was it that he said? So Amarava, so my Amar, so Rav Amar, Gava Amar Me'achashverosh. He said that Haman's plan has now prevailed upon Achashverosh. Achashverosh was reluctant to kill the Jewish people. He had various arguments against it, so Haman was able to convince him. Shmuel Amar Gava Malki Lo Mimalka Tisa. And Shmuel said that the higher kingdom has prevailed over the lower kingdom, meaning the opposite. It's a euphemistic way of putting it, that it wasn't Hashem's original plan to destroy the Jewish people, but somehow these enemies of the Jewish people have engineered it in that fashion. So Esther heard this, so she trembled. She became, Vatiskalkal is a lotion of hollow, that she became hollow inside. Vatiskalkal. So what is my Vatiskalkal? What does that mean? So Amarav Shapir Sanida. It means that the blood came out. She became hollow because she was pierced in neither. She had a period. Rabbi Yirmiyah said that she got an upset stomach and she had to relieve her bowels when she heard this terrible news. So Esther called Hasach, one of her underlings. Amarav, who was Hasach, that she was delegating as her emissary to go to Mordechai with this news that something had to be done. So Amarav Hasach said, Daniel. It was Daniel who played a prominent role in the various kingdoms from Nebuchadnezzar up until, but apparently not including Achashverosh. Why was he called Hasach? Because he was broken off from his greatness, that he was relieved from his position of importance in the Malchus. That up until that point in time, in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, in the days of Belshazzar, in the days of Daryavish Hamadi, in the days of Koresh, preceding Achashverosh, he played a prominent role, but he was just more or less treated as a commoner, maybe a lobbyist. He was around in the kingdom, but he didn't have a portfolio. So he was broken off from his minister portfolio in the days of Achashverosh. Ushmuel Amar Shekol Divrei Malchus Nechtachen Apiv. Shmuel says the opposite, that anything that we had to be carved out in terms of a decree from the kingdom was done through the council of Daniel. Ladas Mazeh, and that's why he was called Hasach. Ladas Mazeh v'Amazeh. So she wanted to know, Esther, to send an emissary. She wanted to send Hasach to find out why Mordechai is running around in ashes and sackcloth and crying. Ladas Mazeh v'Amazeh. So Amar Yitzchak Shokolo. So she said to him, she wanted to send the message. Did the Jewish people violate the 5 books of Moses? So they violate all of the luchos, all of the commandments. And it was eventually reported back to Mordechai what Esther said. There were a few delegations because originally Esther sent Hasach to find out Mazeh ve'Amazeh. It says Vayetze Hasach Mordechai. Hasach went to Mordechai, and Mordechai v'yagid Mordechai is called Shir Karo. And Mordechai told him everything that was going on and why that there was this decree against the Jews that they had to that they had to protest against, and that Esther had to go to the king in order to plead for the lives of the Jews. Hasach went back to Esther and told her the words of Mordechai, and Esther says, Mordechai. Esther told to Hasach that she should report back to Mordechai that she can't go into the king's chambers because she'll get killed because she wasn't called to go into the king's chambers. So only after that it says, Vayagidu the Mordechai. It doesn't say that Hasach then went back to Mordechai to deliver this bad news. So other people told Mordechai this bad news, but Hasach himself did not go back. Back to the Gemara. He himself did not go back to Esther. Did not go back to Mordechai. We see from here that not to be a bearer of bad news. So it wasn't what Mordechai wanted to hear. So Hasach didn't want to bring the bad news. So let other people report it. Leikanos called a Yehudim Gomer. Eventually Esther relented and she said, okay, let's gather, because Mordechai said if you're not going to step up at this point, somebody else will, and this is the whole purpose of your being the queen. So then Esther sent back a message to Mordechai, gather all the Jews and we're going to have a fast. And this was in Chodesh Nisan. And she said, okay, and I'll have to go into Achashverosh to make nice to him. And up until now, I've only yielded to him when he's forced me, but now I'm going to go in willingly. So up until now, she yielded to Achashverosh only when he forced her to. So therefore, she wasn't asura because it was ba'onis. She was essentially raped, and therefore she was permissible to her husband. He wasn't a kohen, so she was permissible to stay with her husband. But now, for the sake of saving the Jewish people, she's going to go in baratzon. So now the halacha is going to be that if that's considered, even if it's for the sake of saving the Jewish people, which is permissible, nonetheless, as the Maharik points out, the Rashash quotes this, since she was doing it willingly, even though she had a justification, that makes her a rebel, somebody who's a ma'alah, that she's rebelling against a ma'alah ma'al, that she's rebelling against her husband, and therefore she becomes a surah, she becomes nitma, she becomes forbidden to her husband. That just like she has been cast away from the Jewish people in her marriage, so to Achashverosh, so too she's not even going to be allowed to come back to Mordechai ever again. But Yabu Mordechai, and Tosfos asked the question, why didn't you just give her a get? That way, when she would be with Achashverosh willingly, it wouldn't prohibit her. She wouldn't be committing an adultery against her husband, and therefore she would be permitted to remarry him later on. So the answer was that a get is something requires a sofer, eid, and bezd, and whatever. It's a public matter, and therefore word would get out, and that would imperil her. So that's why he couldn't give her a get.
You also can't remarry once you're married. You can't remarry your first husband. Isn't that true?
If you're married to another Jewish man, but if she's married to a non-Jewish man, she can go back to her husband. It's only if she's in a halakhically valid marriage that she can't go back to her husband. Let's say she's mizana with somebody else outside of the context of marriage, then she would be allowed to go back to her husband. So Achashverosh was not considered to be a Jewish husband. It wasn't a valid marriage. She would have been able to go back to Mordechai afterwards. But Yavu Mordechai, I knew. So therefore, it's you have that sometimes. A woman is mizana, and then she wants to remarry a previous husband. So as long as she wasn't married to another man, she could go back to her previous husband. V'yavo Mordechai Amarab shehever yom mishon shepesach b'tainis. That the fast days included. They included the 15th day of Nisan. According to Rashi, they were the 14th, 15th, and 16th days. Others say they were the 13th, 14th, and 15th days. But certainly the first day of Pesach was included. That's V'yavur. So he didn't keep the mitzvah. He was over on the mitzvah. He didn't keep the mitzvah of eating matzah because they had to let that day go by. If the lives, it was pikuach nefesh, so the Jews were at stake, so they had to fast. Ushmol Amar De'ava Akuma Demaya. That a Hevir means that he went across a stream of water, that there was like a large river he had to cross in order to get the message out to all the Jews who were on the other side, and he crossed the river. On the third day, Esther wore her royal garb, her royal clothing. Big day Malchus Bibaile. We already had this Gemara in a different context. It should have said the royal clothing, not just Malchus, that she wore royalty. So she wore the spiritual royalty of the divine spirit. Says with respect to David's nephew that he was girded with a divine spirit. Rabbi Elazar using the same lashon of lavsha. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Chanina, the olamati birchas hedyo kala beinecha. Bracha that comes from a simple commoner, you shouldn't take lightly. There were two great men who were the leaders of their generation who were blessed by people who were not the leaders. They were just commoners compared to them. And the bracha worked out to become fulfilled. Beiluain, who are these people? David was number one, and Daniel was number two. David the Barachia Avana. David got Avana, who had the Goren Yavusi, who had this threshing floor that David acquired to utilize to use to place the Aron in this area. So he bought it from Avana, and Avana gave David a bracha when there was a plague that had befell the land after the Ma'aseh Batsheva, the Ksiva Yom Aron Elamelech. The guy that he gave him a blessing. What was the blessing? He said, "Hashem Elokecha Yirtzecha." God should accept all of your offerings that you're making to him. Daniel the Barachia Dayavish. Daniel was blessed by Dayavish. Dayavish the first Dayavish. Really was pressured by his ministers to put Daniel in the lion's den. He liked Dayavish, but the ministers were very resentful and jealous of Daniel because he was the most prominent and respected of all of them. So they said, well, that he prays to God and not to you. And sure enough, it was found to be the case. They said nobody can pray, and Daniel prayed, so they put him in the lion's den. And the Dayavish made a prayer that it should work out, that the lions shouldn't eat Daniel. And indeed they didn't. And then he put the other ministers in the lion's den, and boy, were the lions hungry then. The God that you always pray to all the time, so he should save you. And he did. For Rabbi Elazar, so even though presumably God would have saved Daniel anyway, so the Meforshim say, we see that this also helped. For Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Chanina Alti, that the curse of a hedyot should not be taken lightly by you, even if the curse only comes from a commoner. We thought Avimelech blessed Sarah, but apparently Avimelech had in mind the curse when he gave a gift to Abraham. He gave all of this the silver, right? I gave 1,000 silver tablets to your brother, meaning to Abraham. This should be a covering of your eyes. So Rashi says, so people shouldn't think that I messed with you, because otherwise, why am I treating you so respectfully? But he really, it seems, according to this Gemara, the Maharsha explains that he was really resentful. He meant something bad should happen to your eyes. Because Abraham, we understand, lied about her not being his wife because he had to save his life. But her life would have been saved anyway. She just would have been taken by Abimelech. So why did she have to lie? And he's Kayim Bizarra. And in fact, that curse came true with her descendants. The Yitzchak ended up having poor eyesight in his old age. God doesn't operate like people. Midas pasav adam, adam shofes kedera. A person places a pot over the fire, and afterwards he pours in the water. Kadosh Baruch Hu first puts in the water. No say mayim, and then afterwards he puts down the pot. The kayim hashenemer, as it says, the quality to amon mayim ba shamayim. They're talking about the sound of giving much water in Shemayim, and then Kadosh Baruch Hu brings up the full clouds from the land, but first he fills up the water. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, Kol Omer Davar B'Shem Oma Maybe Gilo L'Olam. We learn from Megillas Esther that if you say some tiding, you say some Dvar Torah in some good thing in the name of the person who said it, that's what brings Geula, redemption to the world. Shenemar Tom Esther Melech B'Shem Mordechai. Esther told the king Achashverosh about the plot of Bigtan V'Teresh that Mordechai had revealed to her, but she said who it came from, and that's what led to the Mordechai's being elevated to the salvation of the Jews. When it was read from the Sefer Zichonos. When a tzaddik dies, what does it mean he dies? His soul lives forever. This is a very profound metaphysical Gemara. He's not really dead. His soul lives forever, but he's lost to that generation. The generation feels, we had such a privilege that we had this tzaddik, now we don't have him anymore. It doesn't mean that he's gone. He's still there. Mashal, the Adam Shavdala Margalis, like a person loses a beautiful jewel, a beautiful pearl. Komak Mashim Margalis Shema. Wherever the pearl is, it's still a pearl. It's just he doesn't know where it is. So therefore, it's only lost to the owner of it, but it's not objectively lost. So to a tzaddik, even when he passes on, it's not objectively lost. Very powerful Gemara. Haman says that none of this is worth anything to me. All this glory and honor that I get, if Mordechai is not going to bow down to me, and I keep on seeing Mordechai, so I'm Rabbi Elazar, because Mordechai reminded him that he was actually a slave. You hear this? This is the Gemara that talks about it. Haman was actually a slave. Mordechai had acquired him as a slave. They were both fighting in some sort of a battle, and they were given a certain stipend, and Mordechai still had money, and Haman had recklessly spent all of his money, and he needed money for food. So Mordechai said, okay, I'm going to give you, but as a result, I'm acquiring you as a slave. And it was written like on the sole of his foot, the contract in which Haman agreed that he's going to be the slave to Mordechai. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, the soul of his shoe. Amar Rabbi Chanina, B'shah Sheva Haman es Mordechai Yosef B'shar Melech Amar Kol Zein Enu Shaveli. To the Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda said, the Rav Chisda Zebap Huzbuli, that this person was the rich one, namely Mordechai was the bull. We're talking about bull market, right? So he was the bull guy. He was the rich one. And this one was the booty, was the poor one, like it says, that Mordechai had acquired Haman as a slave. They called Haman the slave who had been sold for some loaves of bread, because he needed the money in order to buy some loaves of bread. That all of the rights that Haman had to the different chambers of the king, then all of his riches, they were all engraved in his heart. I don't know, like a tattoo. But when he saw Mordechai sitting there, B'shar Melech, he realized everything that he had really belonged to Mordechai, because he was the slave of Mordechai. Why am I staring at somebody's car? So therefore, he said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is eventually going to be a crown in the head of every single tzaddik, as it says, Shenemar, Bayom Hahu, Yeh Hashem Tzavakos, La'ateres Tzivi, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to be for a crowd of glory. And then the pasuk goes on to say, this is a pasuk in Yeshayahu for like a tiara of beauty. For those who do the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Tzivos Hashem, right? And those who yearn for His glory, Yachol Akol. So I might think that everyone in the Jewish people is going to be on this level. Talmud Lomer. L'sharamo, it means for the sharamo, for the remnant of the people. Who's the remnant of the people? It means the meish mishamesim atzmo kishirayim. Somebody makes himself like shar. A person is very, very humble and very, very modest, that he makes himself like leftovers. He cares mostly about other people. The ruach mishpat zeb hadan is a spirit of judgment. The pasuk goes on to say, and as a spirit of judgment. Ruach mishpat zeh hadan is yitzro. This is a person who judges his inclination, meaning that if he did a sin, he does tshuva. Well, the Yoshev al mishpat, and a person who sits in judgment says, Dan din emes la'amito, that a person who judges, and the first part, the ruach mishpat, is that he has the ruach to stop himself from sinning. And this is Liyoshev al Mishra is Dan Din Emes Lamito, that he makes sure to judge himself, that if he sins, he does tshuva. The Gvura Zem is Gaber Yitzro. The Gvura is somebody who overcomes his Yitzim, Meshivim Mechama, Shenosim and Nosnim and Mechamta Shel Torah. That Meshivim Mechama, that the person is always engaged in the Mechama of Torah. He's engaged in the Shakla of learning in the base Medrash. Shara, and we spoke about that, and then it says at the end of the pasuk, Meshivim Mechama Shara, to the gate. These are Talmidei Chachamim that they open and close the gates to get into the first one in the base medrash in the morning, the last one to leave at night. So the Midas Adin said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why are you giving favorable judgment to the Jewish people? So Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because the Jews, they learn Torah. The Torah always saves people from sin, brings people back if they've strayed a little bit. But the Umas Olam, they don't learn Torah. So Amalek he said, however, here too you have judges amongst the Jewish people who are drinking wine and are getting drunk with beer, and therefore they should also get a judgment for a Gehinnom. And Paku el Gehinnom. Paku is a reference to Gehinnom. It shouldn't be a snare. A stumbling block that you'd end up in Gehinnom. And Plili el Dayanim, Plili is a judgment. It's a judgment for Gehinnom. Shenema v'nasan b'flilim. It says in Parshas Mishpatim when dealing with a judgment, v'nasan uses the word b'flilim. So it's not everybody, but those people who do stray. So the Midas Adin is saying, don't give everyone a pass. And Esther stood, getting back to Megillas Esther, she stood in the inner chamber of the inner sanctum of the royal palace. To meet with the king, and there was a scary moment because she hadn't been invited. So therefore, her life was on the line. Whether the king would kindly reach out to her and extend the royal scepter to her or not, or behead her. So on her way to the royal chamber, she had to pass through a chamber of idols. So so she lost her Ruach HaKodesh because she was in an area of idols, which is a violation of Al-Tifnu Ele Ha'ililim. So she said this is in the Mizmor of Ayelas HaShachar, which is attributed to Esther Amalka. God, why have you abandoned me? Are you treating the shogeg when I'm doing unintentionally like I'm doing it intentionally, and that which I'm forced to do as if I'm willingly doing it? So Maharsha says, what are you talking about? If she's giving an excuse for the fact that she was willingly submitting herself to Achashverosh, we already said that she wasn't doing that. Beratzas, where the Rashash says, well, she had a justification for doing it. For saving Klal Yisrael, it's just that since she was submitting herself willingly, that caused her to be forbidden to her husband, even though it was permissible. The Maharsha gives a different answer. The Maharsha says she's not talking about the fact that she was with Achashverosh intimately. She's referring to the fact she's walking through an idolatrous chamber. She's saying, I'm forced to do this, so I shouldn't be judged that I'm doing it baratzah. That's the only way I can get into the royal chamber. Oh, or maybe she says, I'm getting into trouble. I'm in her pleas for salvation. It says in that Mizmor, Hatzila mecherev nafshi miyad kelev yechidasi. Save me from the dog. So maybe it sounds like she's saying maybe I would get into trouble, that I'm referring to Achashverosh disrespectfully as the Caliph. Who cares? Why can't she refer to Achashverosh disrespectfully? Shenema asila mecher nafshi miyad kelev yechidasi. Chazor karaso Aryeh said, but I went back, or maybe at that point she's going back and saying I'm referring to him respectfully now. I'm calling him a lion. Hoshieni mi Aryeh, save me from the mouth of the lion. Shenema Hoshieni mi Aryeh. I think the other explanation you can give for this, I think I saw this in the Maharsha, is that the Caleb is referring to, first she was saying, save me from Haman, that because Haman is Hatzila Mecherev Nafshi is Osios Haman, Hey Mem Nun is Osios Haman. So she was like apologizing that she was not giving the right representation, that she was saying it's all just a plot of Haman, and I didn't realize that this is really a plot that's coming from Achashverosh, who's more like the Aryeh. So I corrected myself and I said, save us from Achashverosh. I didn't think that Achashverosh is on our side either. But he karos HaMelech es Esther HaMalka, and then when the Melech saw Esther HaMalka, Am Rabbi Yochanan, Gimel Malachei Shoris is Damlo Be'osa Shah. She had 3 ministering angels that came to her at that time. One raised her neck to make her look good because a woman looks nicer when her neck is outstretched high up. Another malach made her charming in front of the king. And the other extended the scepter from the king all the way to Esther, which was a huge distance from where she was standing and he was sitting. How much of a distance? It was 2 amos. The scepter itself was 2 amos, and it was extended so that it would be 12 amos. The Maharsha says these are all based upon the number of psukim or letters in the pasuk in different parts of the pasuk and so forth. And some say that it was extended to 16 amos. Some say it was extended for 24 amos. We have a Masor from the Brisa. Al Shishim, it was the 60 letters that appear in the pasuk up to the word of Sharvit, up into 60 amos. We had in this last week's parsha. Bas Paro extended her hand, and it kept on extending until she was able to pick up the basket where Moshe was inside. And we find that as well with respect to the teeth of the wicked people, the that you break the teeth of the wicked people. Don't read shibarta, that you stretch them out. And we have that in the story of Og, how his teeth were stretched out and they got caught in his neck, and therefore he couldn't get this huge block that was on his neck off of his neck, and that's how Moshe was able to defeat him, etc. That it was Masayim, that it was 200, it stretched out 200 amos. Okay. And the Melech said to Esther Amalka, what did he say? So he said, it could be that the actual pasuk that's over there is Malach Esther Amalka. That what can I do for you, Esther Amalka? So what's what do you mean Chatzi Amalchus? What do you mean that he offered her Chatzi Amalchus and not to blow Kol Amalchus? Below Davar Shechotzeitz. So it means that he said, I'm not going to give you the entire kingdom, meaning I'm not going to give you Davar Shechotzeitz, something which is Chatzi, which is Chotzeitz, which separates between my sovereignty and and my kingdom. Lo Davar Shechotzeitz the Malchus. What would separate in terms of his sovereignty? That would, and this is before he even knew she was Jewish. Whatever you're coming on behalf of that binyan beis hamikdash that the Jews want, that's going to take away from my sovereignty. That's the chotzeitz. That's the one thing that's chotzeitz to my malchus. I'm not going to give you. It's not that he was promising her he would give her, malchus. He was emphasizing that he's not going to give anything that he could give her different requests, but not something that's going to be chotzeitz. It's going to diminish his sovereignty. That the king and Haman came to the feast. What did Esther see? That she invited Haman. So 12 answers. That she set traps for him. That you put a trap in the tables and the meal, and something that there'll be a trap that he can fall into the trap, or maybe a verbal trap. She was setting up traps. The second answer, that if you have an enemy, so the best way to overcome them is to kill them with kindness, give them food. Third answer, that she was lulling him into a false sense of security so that he would not have time to rebel against Achashverosh and against his to be even a more threatening figure to take over the kingdom. Fourth answer, that this was all, she's going to have this meal. Presumably, it's not such a kosher meal, per se. So they're not going to recognize that she's Jewish. And the fifth answer, then when they see that she's engaged in just like the regular merrymaking with the ministers of the kingdom, so they'll realize they can't count on her, and they'll continue to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not just rely upon her. Sixth answer, Rabbi Yossi Omer, a sixth answer is that this way he would be around her at every single moment, and she could monitor. She can monitor him carefully, and she can, find an opportunity to bring about his downfall. As Rashi says. Seventh answer, that maybe Kodesh Baruch Hu will see just how badly we've fallen, that even Esther from the Jewish people is involved in the merrymaking with the Haman and Achashverosh. So he'll say, I can't let the Jewish people descend so far or so low. Eighth answer, so she said that I will make it look like I'm consorting with Haman, and that the two of us are plotting together, so that Achashverosh will either kill both of us or one of us. And the rule is that when one high-standing official is killed, so then the decree is nullified. Ninth answer, that Achashverosh was a flip-flopper. So since he was a flip-flopper, so she figured that maybe I'll be able to entice him and seduce him during this period of time and change his mind about Haman, which she did, in fact, and changed his opinion that from loving Haman to hating Haman. So Amar Rabbi is a mercurial figure. The 10th answer, Amar Rabbi Gamliel, Adayin Sikananu L'Modai. He says we need the answer of Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai. The Tanya, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef was fond of this expression whenever he would quote Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, something from the Tzitz Eliezer. He said, "Oh, Adayin Tzrikan L'Modai." The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Hamodai said, "Kinaso b'melach, kinaso b'sarim." That she was trying to create jealousy, that there should be jealousy from the king, and jealousy from the various other ministers, that based on the jealousy that they're going to have of the way she's treating Haman and so forth. So it's going to cause that jealousy to redound to Haman's detriment. Rabba Amar Lifnei Ashever Gaon. Rabba says it's like the pasuk that if you want to bring somebody down, so you make them very, very proud. So before they're destroyed, they reach the height of their pride. She wanted Haman to be like super proud. Abai Rabba, last answer, number 12, Dami Travayo. B'chomim Mashi says Mashtiem. That when they're all heated up, I'm going to make them feast and I'm going to make them drink, that they, and they're going to rejoice, and then they're going to fall asleep and they're not going to awake, like what happened to Belshazzar, that he was so excited about winning his battles that he got too inebriated, and as a result, he became vulnerable and he was killed. And it's the same idea here. So Ashkachei Rabba Baravua Lelio. Rabba Baravua found Lelio, and he said, so I have 12 different explanations. Which one is correct? Amalei Kaman Chazia. Esther Abdahachi, according to which opinion did Esther go, or did Esther follow in order to make the feast? So what was the reasoning that she saw in order to make the feast? Which one of these 12 opinions? So I'm like a kulu tonight, a kulu Amarai. Like all of the opinions of the Tanai and all the opinions of Amarai, they're all correct. Every single one was a contributing factor. Haman told his family the glory of his riches, and what does this mean? And the majority of his sons. What's the majority of his sons? Amarav Lashon Asara Mesu and Vasara Nislu, Vasara Mechazvin al Hapsachim. And it means that he had 10 sons who died, 10 sons who were hanged. Rashash says it sounds like there are different sons. Different sons died, and the ones who were hanged may have been hanged when they were still alive. And then there were 10 more sons that became so impoverished that they had to go begging for alms. The Chachamim say that the ones who had to go begging for alms were 70. It says that those who are satiated, but then we're going to use it as a lashon of a shivim, of 70. So niskaro, they had to hire themselves out. So he says, instead of saying the satiated, why would a satiated person have to hire themselves out? Pashup Shad, he was formerly satiated, not satiated anymore. But we're saying that this pasuk, which is from Shmuel Aleph, is referring to the idea of shivim, that there were 70. So shivim. He says there were 208 altogether. Shenemar Verobana, Veroba Gematria. It says Verov. Verov is, the Gematria is 208. We say, what do you mean? Veroba Gematria Masan Rabisa Havu. It's 214. Why do you say 208? So I'm not going to use it. It doesn't have the extra vav, so it's 208. Now we're at where are we? Parak Vav already. So now the beginning of Parak Vav. That night the king couldn't sleep. So Amar Rabbi Tanchum Nadadosh Nasa Malko Shaloilam. It means the Kadosh Baruch Hu Kiviyachol couldn't sleep because of everything that was going on. that the Malachei Ashares couldn't sleep because they were trying to find arguments in favor of saving the Jewish people, and the people down below couldn't sleep because they were in power. So Rav says, no, we're talking about the sleep of Achashverosh. Achashverosh couldn't sleep, like it says. Nafalei Milsa B'daite, he started to think to himself, wait a second. Why did Esther invite Haman to the Suda? Maybe she's up to some sort of monkey business with Haman that they're trying to that they're conspiring to kill me. So so he says that then don't I have any allies? Don't I have any friends who would tell me? So maybe there would be somebody who, because people do favors for a king, and he does have allies, but they're only going to remain allies if the king pays them back. Maybe somebody did something good for me and I never paid him back. Maybe that's why people are not telling me what's going on if there's a plot that the people are conspiring against me. So therefore he said, I want to bring the book of Chronicles to find out if there's somebody that I owe a payment for a favor that he did for me. So it says, so that sounds like the books res ipsa loquitur. The book spoke for itself, literally. That the words came out of the book. And it says that it was found written. It should have said that somebody wrote it. So the answer is it had been erased, but it got written automatically by itself, even though it had been erased. I should have said kasam. Shimshi. There was this fellow named Shimshi who was the sofer of the king, and he was a really, really bad guy, and who was a carryover from the days of Koresh. And he erased this record of the good deed that Mordechai did, and it got automatically rewritten. Back, they were able to, save from the hard drive. The Gabriel Kosev. Gabriel was the old fashioned version of the hard drive. So Gabriel the Malach rewrote this episode of how Mordechai had saved the life of Achashverosh. Okay, so we'll stop here, and I hope I'll be able to teach in person tomorrow. So Emir Hashem, we'll see what happens.
Shkach.
Okay, we'll see you. Okay, have a good day.